Listen to part of a lecture in an anthropology class.
The concepts of power and authority are related, but they're not the same. Power is the ability to exercise influence and control over others, and this can be observed on every level of society, from, the relationships within a family to the relationships among nations. Power is usually structured by customs and social institutions or laws, and tends to be exerted by persuasive arguments or coercion or even brute force. In general, groups with the greatest resources tend to have the advantage in power struggles. So, is power always legitimate? Is it viewed by members of society as justified? Well, no. Power can be realized by individuals or groups, even when it involves the resistance of others, as long as they're in a position to impose their will. But what about power that's accepted by members of society as right and just, that is, legitimate power? Now we're talking about authority, and that's what I want to focus on today. Okay. When individuals or institutions possess authority, they have a recognized and established right to determine policies with the acceptance of those over whom they exercise control. Max Weber, the German classical sociologist, proposed 3 types of authority in society: traditional, charismatic, and rational or legal authority. In all 3 types, he acknowledged the right of those in positions of power to lead, with the consent of the governed. So, how did Weber differentiate among the 3 types of authority? Well, he divided them according to how the right to lead and the duty to follow are interpreted. In traditional authority, power resides in customs and conventions that provide certain people or groups with legitimate power in their societies, often their origins found in sacred traditions. The example that most often comes to mind is a monarchy in which kings or queens rule by birthright, not because of any particular quality of leadership or political election, just because they have a claim to authority based on traditional acceptance of their position, and in some cases their unique relationship with and responsibility in religious practices. The royal families in Europe or the emperors in Asia come to mind as examples of traditional authority. Okay, this contrasts sharply with charismatic authority, which is derived because of personal attributes that inspire admiration, loyalty, and even devotion. Leaders who exercise this type of authority may be the founders of religious movements or political parties, but it's not their traditional right to lead. What's important here is that their followers are mobilized more by the force of the leader's personality than by the tradition or the law. So, when we think of charismatic leaders in the United States, perhaps John Kennedy would be an example, because he was able to project a youthful and energetic image that people were proud to identify with. Or, if you prefer Republicans, you may argue that Ronald Reagan was able to exercise authority by virtue of his charismatic appeal. In any case, going back to Weber, to qualify for charismatic authority, a leader must be able to enlist others in the service of a cause that transforms the social structure in some way, which leaves us with legal rational authority, or power that's legitimized by rules, laws, and procedures. In such a system, leaders gain authority not by traditional birthrights or by charismatic appeal, but rather because they're elected or appointed in accordance with the law. And power is delegated to layers of officials who owe their allegiance to the principles that are agreed upon rationally, and because they accept the ideal that the law's supreme. In a legal, rational society, people accept the legitimacy of authority as a government of laws, not of leaders. So, an example of this type of authority might be a president, like Richard Nixon, who was threatened with impeachment because he was perceived as not governing within the law. Some sociologists have postulated that the three types of authority represent stages of evolution in society, that pre-industrial societies tend to respect traditional authority. But as societies move into an industrial age, the importance of tradition wanes in favor of charismatic authority, with a natural rise of charismatic leaders. Then, as the modern era evolves, the rational legal authority embodied by rules and regulations replaces the loyalty to leaders in favor of a respect for law. Of course, other sociologists argue that in practice, authority may be represented by a combination of several of these ideal types at any one time.
23. What is the main purpose of this lecture? (24) Why does the professor mention Kennedy and Reagan? (25) According to the professor, what two factors are associated with charismatic authority? (26) Listen again to part of the lecture and then answer the following question.
But what about power that's accepted by members of society as right and just, that is, legitimate power? Now we're talking about authority, and that's what I want to focus on today.
Why does the professor say this?
But what about power that's accepted by members of society as right and just, that is, legitimate power?
(27) In an evolutionary model, how is rational legal authority viewed? (28) What does the professor imply about the three types of authority?